Christmas in Spain, Episode 14 of Our Life and Times Stories, December 24th, 2005. This will be the first Christmas their family has spent at their California home for the past 3 years. In Christmas of 2003, they traveled Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. Last year, 2004, they took the Bavarian tour that brought them to Germany, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Austria. However, tomorrow on Christmas Day, they look forward to a quiet celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ with family and friends. He believes wherever in the world one spends Christmas, it will always turn out well as long as one spends it with loved ones. On December 23, 2003, he and his family boarded an Iberian Airlines flight across the Atlantic for their first trip to Spain. They arrived in Madrid by noontime. Since there were 5 of them, himself, his wife, and their 3 daughters, they took 2 taxicabs to their Holiday Inn hotel in the center of Madrid. Their travel agent told them a taxicab ride from the airport would cost $25 a cab, and she was right. What she didn't warn them about was the exchange rate of the euro-dollar versus the US dollar had risen by 25%. This took them by surprise. In the year 2000, when they took a tour that brought them to London, England, Paris, France, and Rome, Italy, the euro as a medium of exchange was not in place. They spent their US dollars to their advantage because the local currencies, like the British pound, the France franc, and the Italian lira, were a little bit lower the mighty US dollar. The following year, when they took the Scandinavian tour, the euro as a medium exchange was implemented. The countries they visited, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, were members of the European Union and had adopted the euro as a medium of exchange. At that time, the rate of exchange between the US dollar and the euro was 1-to-1. Just 2 years later, the euro had risen and commanded more value than the American dollar. This is why many Europeans, as well as the overseas Filipino workers, OFWs in Europe, can afford to spend their vacations abroad. Indeed, the Europeans were right in banding together since their common economy is now more progressive than that of the United States. Madrid, that early afternoon of December 23, 2003, was a bit quieter than he expected. He peered out of the window of their hotel room and saw empty offices across the way. Was it a normal afternoon in the Spanish capital, or was he witnessing the notorious Spanish siesta when people go home for lunch, take a nap and go back to work by 3? Their tour guide said that indeed they do so, and work up to 7 in the evening to recover for lost time. The Filipinos, who were under the Spanish colonial rule for about 300 years until 1900, inherited this practice. He remembers his grandparents telling them to take a nap after lunch, carrying on the tradition into the late 1950s. Hindi kayo lalaki, pag hindi kayo natulog. You will not grow up if you don't sleep, they would tell the children. Although he only pretended to sleep during those days, he somehow grew up, albeit not as a 6-footer he hoped to become. In order to enjoy his siesta, his father would travel from his downtown printing press in Manila to their house in Sampaloc, about 30 minutes jeepney ride away. These days, with their busy schedules, he doubts if people still have the luxury of being able to practice this tradition. But the Spaniards, he must say, are still sleeping on it. Since they were all dog-tired after an overnight flight across 2 continents, they were just too happy to join the Spaniards in their siesta that afternoon. Paraphrasing the famous quote, they told themselves, when in Spain, do as the Spaniards do, cuando en España, well, you know. They gladly covered themselves with bed sheets. With their windows shut and lights out, all of them slept like a log in the pitch-dark confines of their hotel rooms. They woke up just in time to attend the tour's orientation meeting at a function room downstairs. They asked their tour guide, Monica, for a good restaurant she could recommend for dinner that evening. She suggested the Ristorante de Botín, which claims to be the oldest restaurant in the world. She doubted, however, if they would be able to make a reservation. But after their guide pulled some strings, they got one. From their hotel, they walked towards an underground subway station, which was just a block away, took the train, and got off on the 5th station. He didn't know how his kids managed to navigate, but somehow they made it. When they exited the metro, a lively Christmas fair greeted them. Colorful Christmas lights were strewn over the old buildings and stalls and across the streets. Hundreds of people filled the streets doing their Christmas shopping or simply basking in the festive atmosphere. The stall vendors were selling gift items, souvenirs, food, colorful hats, and wigs for use in New Year's celebrations and other items. There were some shops that specialized in ham only. He never imagined how many kinds of ham there could possibly be. They were hanging against the walls from the ceiling to about the eye level below. And the cheese! If you think you already saw all the kinds of cheese in an American grocery, you will feel humbled by the variety of cheese the Spaniards, or for that matter, the Europeans, come up with. Some looked moldy, but what the heck? It is the inside that one eats. One interesting item showcased in the display windows in almost all meat shops all over Spain is a dressed piglet, about a foot in length, seeming to sleep like a babe on a big elongated metal plate. If the Filipinos have their fried day-old chicks, the Spaniards have their roasted day-old pigs. They gingerly made their way through the thick crowd in the street and ended up in a huge square full of stalls. He noticed most of the vendors were non-Spaniards, perhaps immigrants from the Middle East and China. The cold wind kissing their faces did not dampen their spirits as Christmas lights glittered around them. They were bundled up like Eskimos. For a Manila boy like him, who is not used to the cold weather and spent almost half of his adult life in sunny San Diego, California, it was quite an experience. It reminded him of his mother, who used to wrap around thick clothing on his frail body when he was a little boy, as she would drag him to simbang gabi, or early morning mass, before Christmas in the Philippines. After wandering around the same stalls and still failing to find the restaurant, his daughters gave up and asked a lady for directions. She was from Sweden and had settled in Spain. She was so kind and accommodating, she walked a few blocks with them and led them directly to the doorstep of the eatery. The Ristorante de Botín exceeded their expectations. It was housed in an old building, and a brochure detailed its history and its claim of being the oldest restaurant in the world. He remembers in Paris when their tour guide brought them to another oldest restaurant in town. They must really be good to last that long. And indeed they were. They walked up through a narrow stairway to the second floor. Some Spanish families were celebrating a special occasion, while the others, tourists like them, were marveling and enjoying the experience. His wife and daughters ordered cochinillo, the small piglet dish served only in Spain. He thought he has had pork chops many a times, and chose a dish he has not eaten as much, lamb chops. He liked the cochinillo so much better that he ended up eating most of their orders while he urged them to finish his initial choice. If he wanted to go back to Madrid today, it will simply just to have another taste of cochinillo. He thoroughly enjoyed the dinner and the company of his family. They started off the meal with freshly baked bread dipped in olive oil from the famed Andalusia region of Spain. By the end of the evening, they had finished a huge jug of sangria, which was much more delicious than what he usually had at Spanish restaurants, Café Sevilla or Ole Madrid. In San Diego, even his 18- and 20-year-old daughters could enjoy a drink. They were able to drink as much as they wanted since they did not have to worry about drunk driving. They simply boarded the subway and were transported to the hotel, a crawling distance from the station. After the sumptuous dinner, they went back to the Christmas fair and checked out each stalls. His daughters bought colorful wigs, one in pink and another in yellow and the third in blue. They bought them as a novelty and souvenir items, something to show to friends back home. They didn't realize they would come handy as they wore them as part of their costume during the festive celebration of New Year's Eve at another square in Malaga, Spain, a week later. After another hour of checking the sights and taking photos, they went back to the hotel a few minutes before midnight. Day one of their Spanish adventure was history. The next day, December 24th, they took a city tour of Madrid. They were shown the old and new buildings, the parliament, the palaces, and even the huge bullfight arena and soccer stadium. Their tour guide pointed out to them the significance of the various statues all over the city, with royals on horseback or Greek gods symbolizing particular virtues. By noon, they were brought to the Prado, one of the many museums located in the city. in featured classic works of great Spanish artists like El Greco, Velázquez, and Goya. Another building housed the Modern Art Museum. They saw the Guernica by Picasso. They felt privileged to have seen these famous works of art, just like the Mona Lisa of Leonardo da Vinci, the Thinker of Rodin, and others when they were in Rome 2 years before. This is one advantage of using a tour company instead of visiting places on one's own. One gets to save time and money because the must-see places and sites are almost always included in the package of the tours. After 3 hours, their tour bus brought them back to the hotel, and the guide let them explore the city on their own. They went straight to the shopping district, located just a few blocks away from the hotel. They passed by several shops along a boulevard, including the Swedish chain store H&M, which has become their family's favorite. He thought he saw one restaurant named Jollibee, with a similar logo like that of the Philippine hamburger chain. He did not know whether it was a franchise store. The Spaniards were busy shopping on Christmas Eve. Their guide told them during Christmas Eve and day, they had dinners and family reunions. Gift-giving, especially to children, is not done until January 6th when the Feast of the Three Kings is observed. They had dinner at a restaurant inside the mall. The adventurer in him ordered a Spanish delicacy, adobo de cordero, which is a rabbit dish. His daughters were alarmed. When he was a young man in the Philippines, he used to have rabbit as pulutan, side dish, as he drank beer with his friends in the one and only restaurant that served the delicacy in Metro Manila, if not in the country. The menu posted on the walls of Sianing's restaurant in Balintawak, Metro Manila, included Rabi Reda for rabbit caldereta, Rabi Dobo for rabbit adobo, and Rabi Prito for fried rabbit. They went back to their hotel to rest in preparation for the evening mass they planned to attend that Christmas Eve. By 11:30 in the evening, they walked towards the church, again, just a few blocks from their hotel. His daughters noticed 3 men following them and urged everyone to walk faster. He dismissed it as having much ado about nothing, but the women outnumber him in their family. He was forced to walk as fast as them till they reached the church. Despite the huge size of the church, he was quite disappointed by the small number of people inside. He thought it would be filled with people since it was Christmas Eve. Moreover, he thought there would be more Spaniards going to Mass on such occasion compared to the Filipinos. The Spaniards, after all, brought Christianity to the Philippines and converted the Filipinos to the Catholic faith. As it turned out, there would be more Filipinos attending the Christmas Eve midnight Mass in Manila than the Spaniards in Madrid. On their way back to the hotel, they noticed the 3 men shadowing them again. They walked much faster, almost half running, till they reached the doorstep of the hotel panting. In their room upstairs, his wife brought out some goodies, which they shared as they exchanged their Christmas gifts. As the day changed, they greeted each other, Feliz Navidad. They were in a hotel in a strange foreign land, but they felt like being home because they were all together. That morning of Christmas Day 2003, they had a buffet breakfast with the other members of the tour. Their baggage was out by 7 a.m., and by 8, they boarded the bus on their way to the beautiful city of Salamanca. They found out an elderly Indian couple who were members of their tour group were mugged the evening before. They believed the muggers might have been the same men shadowing them that evening. Had they not walked faster, they would have been their victims. Their travel guides often warned them of the muggers and pickpockets all over Europe. They typically prey on tourists. When they were having breakfast in Sweden one time, a man grabbed his wife's purse from under the table. Luckily, 3 women members of their tour group were coming down inside a glass elevator and saw it happen. They informed the security guard, who then ran after the man. Before they knew that his wife's bag was stolen, the security guard already had it back. A friend of him told him, while they were traveling around Europe by train, their things were stolen while they were asleep inside their coach. It seems the thief sprayed a chemical that induced them to sleep and helped himself with their valuables. The bus gave them another quick tour around Madrid. It was Christmas Day, but it was like a typical Sunday morning in the United States. There were few people in the street, perhaps catching some rest after a hectic Christmas Eve activity. He sometimes wonders why there are always few people in the cities of Europe compared to the Philippines. Last July, while they passed through the city of Taguig on their way to their hotel in Makati, his kids were amazed by the hordes of people walking like ants all over the city all day. Where do they all come from? They asked, as the scene seems to be typical all over Manila. For one thing, half of the people in Europe are under the ground, traveling through the subway systems. In the Philippines, all of the people have to be above ground because an underground subway system would be inundated with floodwater when the rain pours. Besides, Manila, as everyone knows, is seriously congested. Eventually, their tour bus took a highway that would take them first to the city of Segovia and then to Salamanca. There were small hills in the horizon, some farmhouses and farm, as well as olive trees, which are typical in a Mediterranean region like Spain. No wonder most dishes of Mediterranean countries have to have olives, because they come aplenty in their area. By 10 in the morning, they saw the huge Roman aqueduct of Segovia looming ahead of them. They stopped to see the one-of-a-kind sight and take pictures. The aqueduct was built by the Romans when they colonized Spain many centuries ago, and their tour guide said they still work to this day. It looked like a tall bridge made of stone with arch-shaped space in between the posts. From there, they walked through a narrow street made of cobblestone to a huge square. Along the way, he was surprised to see Chanel, Versace, Louis Vuitton, and other high-end boutiques one could see in Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. "Who shop at these stores?" he asked their tour guide, convinced the local folks could hardly afford to buy items from them. Besides, the area looked provincial and isolated. Not the typical cosmopolitan metropolis the jet-setters habitate. "Believe it or not," the guide replied, "the locals have the money." Most of the shops were closed that Christmas Day except for a few coffee houses. They ordered the thick chocolate drink the Spaniards are famous for. During the Spanish times till the late 1950s in the Philippines, this drink introduced by the colonizers were common in the Philippines. Their grandparents had the same utensils, a pitcher or ewer made of metal called batirol, and a wooden moulinet. When they were in Baguio last summer, they had lunch at a native eatery called Chocolate de Batirol inside Camp John Hay and bought the chocolate and moulinet that they sell. They will prepare this chocolate tomorrow, Christmas Eve, and he will imagine himself drinking his grandfather's chocolate or sipping the drink as he looked out the window of a quaint chocolate de casa in Spain. They spent an hour and a half to look around before they moved on. They arrived in Salamanca late in the afternoon, with the huge campus of the Universidad de Salamanca greeting them as their bus passed along the river and turned right to cross the bridge into the city proper. The buildings and layout of the area was similar to Intramuros, the walled city in Manila during the Spanish times. The buildings, though old, were painted and well-maintained and are still habitated as hotels, offices, residences, restaurants, and shops. They stayed in an old hotel building with luxury accommodations. The bed, the dressers, and other furniture were maybe made in the 1800s, although the bathroom with antique fixtures had a modern system. Their hotel room overlooked the busy street below and one side of a huge square across. People were starting to fill out the square and many were walking back and forth in the street. Maybe half of them are tourists, while the other half, local. As the night fell, the Christmas cheer atmosphere became more intense. Christmas decorations on the buildings, especially a life-size figure of Santa Claus climbing on the sides of the buildings, which they found to be common all over Spain, contributed to the festive feelings of everyone. They had dinner at an old restaurant inside the square and spent the rest of the night walking around. At around 11 in the evening, he and his wife found themselves separated from their daughters. They explored the outskirts of the city where the shops were closed and streets quiet. Holding hands and feeling the cool December air, they occasionally bumped into other strollers as they enjoyed with fascination the sight of the different areas of the beautiful city of Salamanca. December 25, 2003 is one Christmas they can never forget. And that closes the book on this matter. This is episode 14 of the YouTube channel Our Life and Times Stories. Subscribe to this channel to enjoy more interesting stories like this. Christmas in Spain is from the book Life and Other Matters by Simeon G. Silverio Jr., published by Papyrus Books, with email address papyrusbooks@yahoo.com. To order a copy of the book, go to amazon.com and enter the name of the author, Simeon Silverio, in the browser.